constraints in design and operation of autonomous driving vehicles. So we all know there are also mechanical constraints, but we will ignore them. So we will focus on these 5 constraints: performance, predictability, storage constraint, thermal and power, because these are the constraints related to computer architecture. Yeah, this one this is repeated slide. So first, as you can understand, power consumption is a major constraint. The MIT's DARPA challenge car had a mini data center inside, and an extra air conditioner was mounted on the top to cool this data center. So in practical setting, this is infeasible. So your driving engine, your computing engine should have very small power consumption. Rest of the things I will show one by one. So first thing is the performance constraint. Okay. Okay. So the reaction time of ADV is determined by 2 factors. One is the processing latency, how fast the system can react. And second thing is how many frames does it process? That means how fast does it process each frame? And so in other words, in a particular second, in 1 second, how many frames can it process? That means how many frames it can process, and each frame how fast it processes them. So they have done some studies on human drivers. So the fastest action by human driver takes 100 milliseconds, which includes different. They study different actions which a human takes, and based on that they count out the least amount of time required for a human driver. So ADV should react faster than that. Okay, so ADV processing latency should be less than 100 milliseconds. So the whole point is, if actually that means in 1 second we have to make 10 decisions, right? 100 milliseconds per action means in 1 second we have to make 10 decisions. Of course, human. I mean, if there is a sudden situation, that's the time we respond so fast. Maybe at other times we respond somewhat slowly. But this is just assuming that there is nothing else stopping the system or delaying the system. Okay. So next thing is ADVs need to frequently update their understanding to keep up with the continuously changing real-time traffic condition. See, especially if I'm going very, very slow, then frames around me, they are not changing fast. That means 1 frame to next frame, the change is very small, right? If you remember our approximate computing presentation, there were some slow moving frames. There was in tutorial, we did some exercise where we had a recording of natural scenes, which were very slow moving, and we could easily sample them, right? So if the scene is very, very slow moving, that means if we are ourselves moving slow, then it is easy because the change between 1 frame to next frame is very slow. But if I'm moving very fast, then I'm covering a lot of distance. That means I have to take care of observing a lot of the surroundings. So in that time, I need to process a lot of frames. So as you can understand now, if my car is driving fast, my computing engine should also be able to process a lot of frames. Okay, so frame rate should be high if traffic condition changes quickly, and that is just my speed. Suppose sometime other person or the surrounding may also dictate that I need to have a high frame rate. For example, if it is a busy surroundings, or a traffic junction, right? See, if it is just you're going fast, maybe in a close to a river, right? That there are not so many frames to process. But if it is a busy surrounding with people coming from all over, maybe not just from front, but maybe left, right, behind, then you need to process more frames. So summary is that ADV should process traffic conditions with 100 millisecond latency at a frequency of at least once every 100 milliseconds. So frame rate should be such that you process every frame within 100 milliseconds. Second thing is predictability. So different phases of computation in ADVs show large performance variability depending on the computation load. So we should take into account tail latency, right, as the metric to evaluate the performance. we should not take average latency, right? If you remember our brainwave, there also we use this term tail latency, right? So here tail latency means 99.99 percentile means even in the worst case latency, your worst case latency should be less than a particular performance bound. For example, here, see, whenever we say traffic condition with 100 millisecond latency, this should be the criteria, or this should be the deadline for the worst case. In average case or best case, your latency may be very good. But sometimes, suppose the scene is very chaotic or very cluttered, then your object detection may take more time to process that scene. Right? So even in those scenes, you should not take more than 100 milliseconds. On average, you know, when it is clear surroundings, very good sunlight, not many people around, you may take very less time. That's fine. But even in the worst case, that means like traffic junction or some accident or some busy area, that time also you should not take more than 100 milliseconds. So this predictability constraint is emphasizing the fact that you should talk about worst case findings, not the average case findings, or the best case findings. This captures the stringent predictability requirement. So storage. So one thing is, so see there are companies like Google's Waymo, right? Google's Waymo. So they assume that when a car is driving in a surrounding, they already have a map of all the surroundings. Okay. Whereas there are other companies, they assume that they don't have a map of the surroundings. Okay, so this is the technical, this is the company side. From our academic perspectives here, see, GPS does not provide necessary precision, because to keep your vehicle in a lane, you need a precision of 10 centimeter or 0.1 meter. So if you want to get this much precision, you can't use GPS data. So you have to use prior map-based localization. So here, in this academic paper, they are assuming that they already have a map of the surroundings. So use prior map-based localization for high precision. Here, surrounding view is transformed into feature descriptions to map the feature points stored in prior map to identify vehicle location. So that means to locate where you are, you see around, and then locate where you are. Now, this map, as we already discussed, we can't depend on cloud at all. We have to store it in the vehicle itself. Now, you have to store. Suppose suppose you can navigate throughout the country. So a US map will require 41 terabytes of data. So if not the whole of US, or maybe a whole of country, but maybe at least part of the country you may have to store. So storage constraint is that we should be able to store tens of terabytes of data. And we should be able to access it with low latency, right? It should not be like very high latency. Okay, thermal constraints are very alarming. So let us see that. Okay, so it has two aspects. One is, see, now let us see the big picture. We have a mechanical engine, right? So our existing cars, they have a mechanical engine. There we don't have any computing engine, because we are the computing engine, right? The driver. But in this autonomous driving vehicles, mechanical engine will be there, right? You can't avoid that. Your computing engine is just making the decision, but to translate that into mechanical action, you need the mechanical engine. So that mechanical engine is there. On top of it, we have passenger and we have computing engine. Now, mechanical engine is generating heat plus passenger. Now, passenger, we can't inconvenience the passenger, right? You can't put a lot of heat on the passenger. And now computing engine itself needs some climate controlled conditions, right? So given all this, so now these are the constraints, as you can understand. So mechanical engine is dissipating heat, this computing engine is dissipating the heat, which can affect the mechanical engine and the human, right? And the mechanical engine heat should not affect this computing engine, otherwise this will its temperature will go outside the range. So it has two aspects. One is the temperature of the space where the computing engine is kept should be within system's operating range. For example, as you know, like some of the, for example, my desktop, currently it can work because here the temperature is maybe between 25 to 30. And even if I keep it in the data center room, here the temperature should not exceed, like suppose 55 degrees Celsius. So that is the operating range. Now, heat generated by computing systems should have low impact on the vehicle. As I said already, that means this computing system should not generate very high heat that it affects the mechanical engine. Now, outside the passenger cabin, temperature can get quite hot. Suppose you want to keep this computing engine on the top of the car. That's infeasible because it will accumulate dust plus heat and security challenges. So you have to keep it inside the car, or at least in some protected environment. So it has to be kept in a climate-controlled passenger cabin. But then passenger has to bear the extra heat and temperature due to the computing engine. That means now we have protected the mechanical engine, but the computing engine is generating heat which is affecting the passenger. And they have studied that a computing engine which consumes 1 kilowatt power can raise temperature by 10 degrees Celsius in a minute if you don't have any additional cooling. Okay, 1 kilowatt power. So let us see. So suppose your GPU has a power budget of 200 watts, and you have just 5 GPUs. Here 5 is probably on higher side. You will not have 5, but suppose you have 5 GPUs. So just 5 GPUs, and assume there is no other power consumption in any other electronics or battery. So if just having 5 GPUs will give you 1 kilowatt of power consumption. So that will increase your temperature by 10 degrees Celsius in a minute. And you know, cars can get very hot. Right? You just park them, it gets very hot. Whereas two-wheelers, they are quite easy. So because they don't have a metal body. So here, that's why you need extra AC required within the computing engine of the cabin. That means, as you know, for example, in data centers, we keep an extra AC. Right? For my desktop is, it can be operated at room temperature. But anything which is moving inside the car, and within the car you have heat from the surroundings like sun. So you need an extra AC for the computing engine. So the summary is that we have to keep the computing engine in a passenger cabin, and we have to add a cooling capacity for removing the heat and regulating the temperature. Questions here? Any questions here? No. Okay, let's go. I think this is simple to understand, but it's important to see. These are intuitive points, but when you apply it to autonomous driving situation, you understand much more. Now let's see power constraint. So suppose we can assume a battery operated vehicle. Fine. Okay, a battery operated vehicle. So the battery is driving the mechanical engine. All right, the battery is driving the mechanical engine. And the same battery is also used for this computing engine. Okay, you understood? The battery is driving the mechanical engine. The battery is also driving the computing engine. So now let us see this computing engine. How much does it impact that battery and the vehicle's performance? So total power consumption is power consumption of computing engine, storage, and cooling. Now, how much power will it take depends on its type. So we have already discussed a lot power consumption of CPU versus FPGA versus GPU and an ASIC. So we all know it. Now here is they have assumed a Chevy board, which is battery operated. Now they have shown results in 2 parts. One is just the power consumption of computing engine. That means ignore storage, ignore cooling. So if you have CPU plus FPGA, it consumes this much power and it causes this much reduction in the driving range. So on the right side, this yellow bar here, that's on the right side, driving range reduction side, and this dark brown, that is the power consumption, which is on the left side. So if you ignore the storage and cooling, with CPU and 1 CPU and 3 GPUs, you have close to 800 watts of power consumption. As I said, with 5. So here it's little higher than GPU. So just 3 GPUs, and a CPU can take you around 800 to 900 watts of power, and it can degrade your driving range by maybe 6%. And if you compute the storage and cooling overhead also, then it just doubles. So compared to computing engine alone, the entire system is twice more costly. So that means you can't ignore storage and cooling. And this is anyway a rule of thumb that cooling takes almost the same amount of power as your main computing engine. That means, for example, if you see our data center, see in our desktop laptop we don't need cooling, but if you see if you go to our data centers, you will find out. I mean nowadays, of course, Google has optimized a lot, but conventionally the wisdom was that if you're spending one watt of power to operate an equipment, you need to spend almost a similar amount of power for cooling it also, maybe similar or maybe 80% or 50%. So cooling costs are very, very high, right? And that's the reason nowadays many data centers they are designed in places like maybe very cold cities like Chicago or maybe other places which are very, very cold. Some of the European countries which are towards the North Pole. It's because the cooling costs are reduced, because operational costs are very high. So, for example, in Iowa State, where I was studying for my PhD, so they had a supercomputer, but later they closed it because the operational costs were becoming very high. So these operational costs are very, very high, not just purchase cost. Purchase cost is just one time, but later on you have to also think about the operational costs. So findings, summary from the previous slide: computing engine contributes only around half of the power and range reduction. Storage and cooling contribute the remaining half. So as you all can hear, we already showed that computing engine is only half of the power consumption. Storage and cooling contribute the rest of the half. So summary is the total power consumption is this. In a power-hungry ADB can greatly degrade fuel efficiency or your driving range. Of course, here by fuel I don't mean like petrol. Because here we're assuming battery-operated device. So whatever is your battery, if your computing engine takes a lot of power, then battery capacity will go down. Any questions? So we have discussed all these constraints. Now let us see the design. So now they mentioned the algorithms. So I will not go into the details of the algorithm, but for object detection, they use YOLO algorithm, which is the best open source algorithm, and it detects vehicles, bicycles, traffic signs, and pedestrians. For object tracking, they use GoTurn algorithm, which is again an open source algorithm. And for localization, they use ORB-SLAM, again open source algorithm. Okay, so the whole point is these are the three algorithms they are going to test, okay, on different hardware platforms. So latency, first of all, let us do the baseline results. So these components will check on multi-core CPU. Here, this is a logarithmic scale. So detection, now first thing you can see, or second thing you can see is that fusion and motion planning, they take very small amount of time. So you can ignore it or you can do them in the cloud, no problem. Now detection, tracking and localization, they take most of the time, especially the detection takes a lot of time. Further, latency of detection, tracking, localization already exceeds the 100 millisecond latency constraint, which is this dark red line. This dark red line is at 100 millisecond. So if you see the worst case, right, this yellow, this light yellow, it is these numbers are already above the 100 millisecond deadline. So the conclusion is that CPU is not ideal for meeting real-time deadlines. All right, and here you could see like on average this was acceptable. Localization you could have run on CPU, but in the worst case you can't run it. So that's why you should not rely on the mean, or you should not rely on the average case data. Okay, so is this slide understandable? Anyone who has questions? Any questions from this? I hope you can answer. So here we are building the motivation that CPU is not sufficient for executing these algorithms. Okay, now let us see the cycle breakdown. So that means now let us see these algorithms more closely. Where are they spending their cycle? So detection, Most of the time is taken by DNN. Tracking also time is taken by the DNN. In the localization, 86% of the time is taken by feature extraction. So we can ignore this small part and just focus on accelerating these computation intensive parts. So we'll accelerate them using GPU, FPGA, and ASIC and see which one works best. Okay, so we have already discussed this part. You know what each of these platforms are. Now, for CPU, they have used this. For GPU, they have used this. For FPGA, they have used this. For ASIC, now for ASIC, they have one ASIC for CNN, one for fully connected layers, one for localization. So separate ASICs were made. Now, one more thing is that in the rest of the presentation, I will use the word CPU, GPU, FPGA, ASIC. But see, the results assume this FPGA. If they had a better FPGA, the results could have been better. All right. Similarly, this is somewhat an older GPU. Maybe GPU capacities have improved much more than the capacity of a CPU. So it may turn out that with the current GPU, you may exceed the performance of ASIC. Okay. So just remember this point. So whenever I say FPGA, it's not that all the FPGAs are worse than GPU or all the FPGAs are worse than ASIC. This particular FPGA and this GPU comparison, what is the result? That's what we are discussing. And they assume a single camera. So first thing they find is that mean latency can lead to misleading conclusions. We have to use tail latency to evaluate predictability. Okay, you should never rely on average. We all know, right? Average is a very misleading metric. Anytime it can go wrong. Okay. Next, GPU, FPGA, and ASIC reduce the tail latency by this much compared to the CPU. Okay, so that means highest performance is obtained by GPU, next highest is ASIC, and third is FPGA. Now here is the latency on different platforms. This is the mean latency across platforms. This is the 99.99 percentile latency. So here, if you put this 100 millisecond, then FPGA also is not suitable here. This FPGA is not suitable because here the latency is high, here the latency is high, here the latency is high, here the latency is high. So that means if you run these algorithms on CPUs or GPU, you already exceed the end-to-end latency constraint. Okay, whereas GPU and ASIC, they are able to run these algorithms within 100 millisecond latency constraint for all the 4 algorithms. Oh, sorry, all the 3 algorithms. Detection, tracking, localization. For the worst, even in the worst case, latency is below 100 millisecond for GPU and ASIC. Okay. Any questions to this point? Now, further, multi-core CPUs can execute localization algorithm within performance constraints on average, but they have high tail latency across all the 3 tasks. So if you see, for localization here, this 40 is less than 100, so that's fine. But if you see the tail latency is not acceptable. Right? Now, due to large performance variability, tail latency should be used for evaluating the performance. Other computing platforms do not experience significant increase from mean latency to tail latency. That means they are preferable for such mission critical tasks. So in CPU, what happens? Your mean is here and tail is here. But for other 3 platforms, GPU, FPGA, and ASIC, mean and tail latencies are almost similar, or exactly similar. No, not almost similar. For GPU, there is some time increase, but it's not so much increase. But for CPU, the increase is very high. That's why that means GPU, FPGA, and ASIC, they give you predictable execution time. Now, in terms of 0.9 and 9.3 and 1. So, I mean, sorry, 0.1. So this is how much? So this is less than, less than 20 watts of power, right? So even if you run all these three algorithms on ASIC, you consume less than 20 watts of power, which is very, very good. You can easily dissipate that much amount of power. So that's why it's very, very clear that CPU and GPU cannot be used in the autonomous driving vehicles. Although GPU is giving very, very good performance, that means latency is very good, but it is also consuming high amount of power. That's why GPU cannot be used. So choice of accelerator platform has a significant impact on the vehicle driving range and fuel efficiency, as I already said. So that's why power consumption of any accelerator we choose has to be very, very low. So to summarize, CPU is the slowest, and it also has highest unpredictability. It also has very high power consumption. So CPU is out of the picture. FPGAs cannot meet performance target due to limited number of DSP. This particular FPGA cannot meet. Maybe some better FPGA could have met. FPGA and ASIC are much more energy efficient than GPU. So if you see in terms of energy efficiency, FPGA and ASIC are the best. GPU is fast, meets timing deadline, but is very power hungry. It reduces driving range by 12% if you use 3 GPUs. FPGA ASIC, they reduce driving range by less than 5%. So overall, ASIC is the best. ASIC is good on all the metrics, right? Power, performance, and so on. Okay, ASIC it also provides high predictability, and it can meet real-time processing targets of ADV. And further, if you want to, in a real ADV, you will have to process multiple cameras, right? So then you can understand the power consumption requirements just add up. Okay. So this is the paper.